It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and we are in part 2 of the series of what to expect in each of these different dieting nutritional phases. And today we're going to do what to expect during a cut, a deficit, fat loss phase, whatever you want to call it. And I think many women have done calorie deficits and fat loss attempts in their adult lives more than they probably prefer to. However, this is what to expect during a cut and a diet phase that is executed effectively. And like, we're not looking for the dopamine hit. So often we're like, scale down, scale down, scale down. This is the realistic expectation of a healthy cut that gives you results that last you more than a couple of weeks, because that tends to be, unfortunately, what most women and individuals experience when they attempt fat loss, because they just don't really understand the behavioral aspects and really how to manipulate metabolism effectively, ultimately. So, Jess, where would you like to kick off? I know we have some like key talking points that we want to make sure we hit.
I guess similar, I'm going to draw parallels to our last episode about what to expect during a successful build phase. Weight is not weight, right? Like weight does not equate to body fat, right? So you can lose or gain good weight, healthy weight, lean tissue, bone density, muscle mass, or you could lose or gain body fat, right? Both of those things are weight. Or you could lose or gain water weight, right? Just because you see the scale go down does not mean that you are losing body fat. So, and again, a lot of times we might be losing body fat and also at the expense of perhaps losing lean, healthy tissue, which might put you in a worse off position metabolically later, health-wise later. So during a build phase, we talked about our intention is to build as much muscle as possible with as little body fat as possible. Our intention during an effective cut or an effective diet or an effective fat loss phase is to lose as much body fat as possible while maintaining as much muscle as possible. Okay. So the reason I really want to differentiate this is because you could do the former and actually lose more weight. So I think a lot of times women will compare themselves. Like sometimes women in our program will be like, oh my gosh, my friend lost 20 pounds though in a month and a half on this other thing. Should I go do that because she lost it so fast? Well, time out. You lost the same amount of inches as her, even though you only lost 8 pounds, right? But that's because you maintained muscle mass. So your body is actually in a healthier place if it has more muscle mass and the same amount of body fat as if it had less muscle mass and the same amount of body fat, right? Does that make sense? So like, and I think this is very hard for women to grasp, to like wrap their mind around, but like if we were to spend let's say we spent a year building muscle, right? Let's say we put on 10 pounds of muscle and then we, over the course of a few months, lost 10 pounds of body fat. You're the same weight, but you're way healthier. And physique wise, you look completely different. You look like a totally different version of yourself. Whereas if somebody just lost those 10 pounds of body fat, they might be excited that they saw the scale go down, but they're actually in a less healthy place and they look less lean than the person who has that muscle mass too. So again, our goal is maintain muscle mass. We are still training as if we want to build muscle. Now, if we don't have added calories to put tissue on our body, you can't really build muscle while you're eating in a deficit. But we want to maintain it to the best of our ability. So that's kind of what we want to talk about. And like, I think the pace at which we lose is very important. But it's not just the pace, right? Like we talk about the pace a lot. I think I hear a lot of trainers say that online, like, okay, well, a healthy fat loss phase is only 1% of your body weight. Or like for most people think like a half a pound to a pound and a half a week, maybe. If you have more to lose, maybe two or 3 pounds a week, but usually half a pound to a pound a week. Okay, that is true, assuming you are getting plenty of protein and also strength training. Because if you are losing that and you're not doing those other 2 things, you're probably losing some of that from lean tissue as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very relative to what your inputs look like. And the goal is to hang on to muscle as much as humanly possible and lose actual body fat. I sometimes describe this as, so many women are like, well, I liked how I felt at 140, or I liked how I felt at 125. And it's like, okay, but we want to make sure that that's a good, healthy, lean, strong 125 or 150 or 170 or whatever it is that you're working towards. And when you're losing weight, you're not always going to see the scale just trend down, down, down week over week. So a lot of times with clients, we'll have them weigh in daily actually, so that one, they can normalize and get comfortable with scale fluctuations, which really we're doing generally well before a fat loss phase anyway. But it's really helpful to see averages in a fat loss phase. So I did this for a client. It was so helpful. I was like, hey, you're only weighing in like twice a week. Do me a solid and do daily for a couple weeks just so you can see. And it was so helpful for her to see 7 weigh-ins, how her body's responding to her inputs day over day. It's not always going to be perfect correlation, but then she's like, cool, my average this week was this, my average this week was this. And she could see her average trending down, even if the weigh-in that check-in day was actually higher than last week or something, right? So that part of it is important to know, that it's going to be up and down, even if you're in a deficit, because there are a lot of variables to consider. All the normal, right? Cycle, sodium, water, hydration, sickness, inflammation, all of those things. We even have clients who are very new to lifting who don't necessarily see the scale trend down in the early stages of a deficit, because they have that newbie advantage where they are adding muscle, even though they're not fully at maintenance, right? That's not as common of a thing to see, but just giving different perspectives of why the scale is just not the best piece of data in that. But to Jesse's point, yes, we want to lose a percentage of body weight, and that's the realistic range, assuming that it's body fat that we're losing. You don't want to be a smaller version of this body that you don't like right now. We want to actually lose body fat and look leaner and look toned and look all of the things that you have in your head.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point for when you're in the build phase or a maintenance phase, right? So we start all of our clients off, we're trying to build muscle first. If you're not losing weight, you are not in a deficit. You are at maintenance, you're in a surplus. You're not in a deficit based on what your body was previously adapted to, if you're not losing weight. But if I have a client who's at high calories and we're just trying to maintain and they're losing inches, beautiful. I am not bringing them into a deficit because they are losing body fat. So why pull that tool if we don't have to yet, right? Because at some point, once we do drop calories, our body someday will adapt to those calories as our new norm. So we don't really want to have to rope that in and be in a diet until we really have to. So if your inches are going down while you're just adding protein and adding strength, keep going. And then once it starts to stall out, then you could consider maybe going into a deficit. But enjoy those newbie gains as long as you possibly can. And I think also I kind of want to get into sorry, I'm going to go back. I don't have everybody weigh in daily, but I love it as a tool if somebody starts to panic, right? Because usually we're kind of like pointing out to them the why behind it, right? Okay, if somebody, it really trends over time are the most important thing, but let's say you lost a pound a week for a couple weeks and then this week you gained 2 pounds. Oh my gosh, no, I gained 2 pounds. Am I are all my progress, am I backtracking on my progress? No, you just started a new lifting phase this week and you're super sore, right? Maybe your muscles are more inflamed and you're retaining water. As your coaches, we're looking at that data to show you oh, you had a beer on Saturday. You were still in your deficit. You probably still lost body fat, but you're a little bit inflamed from having alcohol that you don't usually have, right? So all of those things, it's our job to kind of point out the why. And then usually what happens is if you are on and being consistent with all of the things, the next week we might see 2 pounds drop, right? So again, all weight is not created equal. But I kind of wanted to go into how do we determine what a deficit looks like? Because I think a lot of people use an online calculator and then they just decide, oh, okay, it tells, I did this back in the day. Well, it says I'm 5 feet tall, so I'm supposed to eat 1,200 calories. Did I lose weight? Yes. Was I in a deficit? Yes. Did I need to go that low? Absolutely not. I did not need to. So what you want to do is get some sort of baseline. And again, if you're spending time building, then okay, cool. I'm averaging 2,600 calories a day. Now when I go to cut, I'll start at 2,000 or 2,100 and see what happens. If I lose weight, great. My body actually was up there long enough to be adapted to it, and I am now in a deficit. If I don't lose weight, I drop down a little lower and a little lower until I find my body is going to give me information on what I'm actually adapted to. Once I find that spot, and again, assuming you are being consistent. If you're inconsistent and then you're oh, it didn't work this week, I'm going to drop it lower, then that is not what we're talking about here. If you are consistent and week over week, we're seeing the scale drop, great. don't cut your calories lower. Hang tight. You want to, again, the minimum effective dose constantly. You want to hang there because someday your body will become adapted to that and that will become your new norm. When that happens, then we drop your calories a little bit lower and we ride that out until you plateau, right? These plateaus are inevitable. It's not something broken in your body. Our metabolism adapts. So when that plateau happens, you have two choices. Do we drop a little lower or do we build back up into that build phase and maintain this new physique that we've just created? So when does that happen? There's lots of different things that we look for. Like we may look at, you know what, you're really like, I know you're aiming for 1600 and you think like, we do think that that's a deficit when you hit it, but you're not really consistent with it. So like, if you're not being consistent with it, we're not really in a deficit. That might be one factor. Two, are you mentally burnt out from being in a deficit? You don't have to stay in it. Let's get out of it. Three, is your body actually not responding anymore because it's truly adapted to this low amount? Like one, do you really want to cut lower? It's kind of hard to hit your proteins and get enough nutrients when we're lower. Two, do we even recommend it? Because again, I've seen coaches out there like, well, some people just have to cut to 1100 to see that change. Honestly, like if I can't adapt you to the point that you're not seeing results at 1400, I don't like bringing anybody lower than that because I don't think it's necessary ever. Usually my clients are cutting around like 1800 to start. So there's lots of different factors that we look at here. It's not as simple as like, okay, I'm just going to diet until I get to 120 pounds and then I'll come out of the diet. It's like, well, your body's going to adapt along the way. We're going to have to make adjustments to your targets. At some point, it's going to plateau. Then there's only two directions to go, either down or building back up. Like at that point, you need to know what data to look for and like be okay with the fact that this is going to come in phases.
And that steady pace is so important because, first of all, just starting a deficit, sometimes things are happening even if you're not seeing it reflected on the scale yet. So I usually will tell a client, we got to give this a good 3 weeks of you being consistent in this drop. Let your body adjust and shift, and then the scale. And that's not always the case, but I'm just giving you that perspective of like, so often it's like, well, I was in a deficit for a week and I didn't lose anything. I can only lose at 1200 calories. My metabolism's slow. My metabolism's broken. It's like, you gave it 5 minutes, relax, right? So just knowing that, having that realistic expectation and pace, I cannot tell you how many times I have had a client in their first deficit with me, and no matter what expectation I set ahead of time, they'll do a perfect reverse and build and all the things. They'll be in a tizzy and be like, this isn't working. And I'm like, dude, you lost a pound this week. Your inches are down. Everything is okay. But like, sometimes they need that reminder and that drawback to the data of like, you're good. You're used to doing Weight Watchers and Optavia and keto when you lose 5 pounds in the first week of water weight.
Water.
So heavily restricting. So having that expectation is important, but not rushing it and giving yourself a nice long runway to actually execute a deficit. And sometimes I throw around like a 12 to 16 week like recommendation for a fat loss phase. That looks a little bit different when you're actually working with a coach and you have data and you are doing a reverse and a build phase and all of that. We can extend that runway in a lot of cases. However, you can't come to me and say, I got a wedding in 8 weeks. I need to drop the weight. And it's like, that's not helpful. For one, you're metabolically probably not in a good place. And also you're going to have to be so aggressive. You're not going to be able to stick to it. Right. So like, be patient, enjoy, and give yourself that runway to like fully execute so that you're not drop. And then you can't stick to it and you're pissed and you're like, this doesn't work. And it's like, yeah, because you're in a deficit 2 out of 7 days of the week. Right.
And when you say runway, I also want to clarify the runway is all the time spent leading up to that diet, right? Yes. If I spend a year not dieting, my 3 month, I can pop into a 6-week diet and see my body change because I'm spending so much time at high calories and just focusing on building muscle.
Yeah, I don't mean diet forever.
If you have spent, we should be spending the majority of our time not dieting, right? And then that diet becomes really effective because our body is not adapted to low calories. So if you are somebody who has spent the last year on Ozempic or keto or doing all these different diets, right? And then now you're like, okay, I spent 8 to 10 weeks building. I'm ready to cut again. Unfortunately, you spent so long at those low calories. Even if you're up to let's say 2200 or so for those 8 weeks, when we drop, your body's probably not adapted fully to 2200. You just told me that you spent a year at 1200 first. Like, unfortunately, we may have to keep cutting lower for you. Or you can make that choice to spend that time on the front end, spending more time in the build phase to set yourself up a little bit better.
That's a great point. So like when women come to us and say like, okay, you get these fat loss results, it's like, well, hold on. We don't have this like magic potion we pull out during the deficits we execute for clients. It's because we guide them through a really effective reverse maintenance build phase so that their deficit is easier and they don't have to restrict as heavily. So yes, the runway is having proper nutrition phases throughout the year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. You shouldn't have to constantly be in these diet phases and nutritional periodization until the end of time. Realistically, you're in the season of physique change as your main priority in not in life, but generally speaking, it's a top priority for you. At some point, you should just be able to maintain, live life, whatever. Sure, life happens. Jess and I probably haven't dieted in a long time. And then each of us, I don't know, once a year might be like, I'm going to do a little something, right? But we can do that because we live at such high calories all of the time to where dieting isn't like on our radar, right? Generally speaking, we're just kind of living life and building muscle and that's healthy.
That's where we hope that and that's what episode 3 in this series is going to be about. Okay, well, once I've done a few of these phases and I've kept my body composition different, but I've learned to build my calories back up and maintain it, then what, right? Like, so that's what episode 3 is going to be about. But yeah, I think there's just like, there's a lot of, I know how to lose weight. Okay. If you don't know how to keep it off, you're not doing it well, right? So we want to educate you on how to do a deficit really, really well. Crush your protein. These 3 things actually stay the same. Okay. So whether you are dieting, building, or just maintaining, you need to train to get stronger, eat a lot of protein, and add a lot of colors, plants, nutrients, fiber, whole foods, right? Those 3 things are constant. If you then want to build, you increase calories. If you want to cut, you decrease calories. If you want to maintain, you kind of find that spot where your body isn't losing or building. But if you are doing those 3 things, you will constantly maintain a healthier body and a healthier physique overall because you're going to be able to either build or preserve muscle mass throughout.
Absolutely. So in terms of like what to expect, just as like a recap, fat loss rate, we're not looking for that 5-pound drop in the first week. If you have it, cool. But we want to be realistic with the expectation going into it. So sometimes I think it's helpful to reverse engineer, and I'll do this with clients sometimes of like, hey, you've got this overarching goal of losing 50 pounds. We know we have to break that down now into smaller goals, right? So realistically, you went through a healthy build at a realistic expected rate of loss in this deficit, how many weeks we anticipate spending in it, which can totally change, right? But we just try to have a game plan. Let's reverse engineer, and we can expect somewhere in this range, right? If it's executed and your body responds the way that we anticipate it responding. So I think that's also important of like, if you have a big goal to lose 50 pounds, don't just think I got to diet until I lose the 50. Break that up into chunks and know that runway that Jess and I talk about is build, deficit, reverse back to and build, deficit, right? So we're spending most of the time at maintenance. That doesn't mean, oh, well, half the year, however long your maintenance, you're not seeing progress. That's part of the progress. And that's a very crucial part to this, which again, we'll elaborate on in part 3 of the series, but just know that that's kind of the case. And I think that makes fat loss a lot easier for you to stick to mentally. It's not like, oh, I got to start a diet on Monday. I'm fat. I hate the way my pants fit, whatever. And not that it's like fun and exciting, but it's just you're more mentally like locked in and ready to go and ready to execute and ready to do the things you have to do. There's a little sacrifice that comes with fat loss, right? You don't get to YOLO as quite as much as you can at maintenance, right?
There's still flexibility. We're not suggesting super restriction or you can't have carbs, you can't have this. But when there's less calories to play with, you are going to have a harder time hitting your protein target, and you're going to have to make choices of what's worth it, right? But yeah, I think that those are really, really important points in terms of like expectations. I also think we didn't really touch on, I know I said maintain muscle, but we didn't touch on exercise a ton. A lot of women will be like, I'm just going to add in HIIT workouts, or I'm going to start running again. Cardio, we're not doing cardio to lose fat. We're decreasing calories to lose fat, and we're training to maintain muscle. Now, doing more cardio or getting more steps might just increase your caloric expenditure a little bit, so you don't have to cut calories right as low, right? But that does not equate to more body fat loss, period. You need to train the same like you're trying to build muscle. And then strength shouldn't be decreasing. So I think that's another important one. Like a lot of times I think women, recently, especially with the GLP-1s out, I think a lot of women are like, yeah, I'm losing so much weight. But then they stop training because they're just seeing this easy weight loss. Okay, well, they're losing strength. And when they're losing strength, that means they are also losing healthy, lean muscle tissue, which is important for health and for metabolism, but really for health also. So if weight is going down and inches are going down, weight's going down by maybe a half a pound to a pound a week. Strength should be staying the same pretty much throughout that whole phase.
And the way you train there's not a different way to lift weights in fat loss versus building. Now, am I going to test your 1 rep max and the depth of a deficit? No, because obviously that doesn't logically
You're
make
going to be a little
right?
more weak.
Right.
Yeah, you'll be a little more weak.
So you might not be like increasing your weights and hitting PRs week over week in a deficit, but you should maintain your strength. I have seen clients have like a little bit of a dip of like, I'm a little bit more like winded, right? Something at the end of a workout, or maybe just not quite as like energetic and ready to rock when they get to the gym, but strength should be maintained.
We're not steadily decreasing. Right. If we're decreasing, then there's a problem if that's a steady trend that we're seeing. And also going back to like the build phase and the runway, during that time that we're learning to build, you're practicing how you're going to keep the weight off after the diet, right? So if we're increasing calories, and you're not gaining inches, great. That's exactly how we're going to get your calories back up once we've lost this weight after the deficit.
Absolutely. So most importantly, what to expect during a cut when we're saying all of these things is assuming that you have done an effective build phase and or have just been in a place of maintenance, eating lots of food, fueling your body, living life, not diet. And then, Jess and Jill said this is what to expect during an effective deficit and my body's broken and it can't work. We are doing this because we're going through these phases when your goal is physique change. So fat loss, actually, let me rephrase that. Weight loss is easy. It doesn't require any skill set. You can lose weight tomorrow and anybody can wake up with absolutely no knowledge and eat less and move more and see the scale go down. Fat loss that is sustainable is an actual skill, and you have to have either a coach or like an expert that's supporting you in that, or at least the foundational knowledge of how to manipulate these variables effectively. I'm not saying that people who don't have enough knowledge or don't hire a coach can't lose fat, right? But to make it as effective and efficient and feel as good, I guess, for lack of a better description, as possible, and make sure that you keep those results forever, you have to do it in phases. You have to get back to maintenance. You should not have to restrict to lose fat and then restrict to maintain that fat loss. If so, you're not doing it right, and you shouldn't have. Now you're down-regulating hormones, down-regulating all these internal functions, and now you're like, I'm puffy, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I'm bloated all the time, and I don't know why. You got to get back to
your body's stressed out.
Yeah, give your body that fuel to function.
Cool. I feel like
we'll be back for part 3 next week for what to expect during maintenance, because I love the word maintenance, and I feel like it's thrown around quite ineffectively. And if you listen to this series, this is probably going to be the most important one of all 3. You're all trying to deficit and we all want to make sure it's effective. So obviously listening to this one is helpful, but maintenance and knowing really how to face through those things, I think, is so critical. So hope that was helpful, and we will talk to you guys next time for part 3.